Hello, everyone, and welcome to day two of our study. If you're watching this today, it's January 1st, 2024. So, Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you enjoyed your celebration last night and rang in the new year with gladness. We're looking forward to this whole study here in 2024. Today, we is day two, so we hit John 1 through 18. And this is a unique um, intro of all the intros to the books of the New Testament. Is probably one of the more catchier ones that we have, and we'll look at that here in a second. But the writer here only identifies himself as an eyewitness and the beloved disciple, or I think some translations say the one whom Jesus loved. And so we again, kind of like Mark, it doesn't say for sure that this is John anywhere in the writings, but we can kind of look at the hints, the guidelines that are inside the writing of John, and we can see that more than likely that this was John. So again, I'm going to be honest about this stuff when it comes forward. We don't know 100% sure that it was John, but we know pretty sure that it was John because of the way that it was written and who it was written to. More than likely, John was written sometime between AD 85 and AD 95. It was one of the last Gospels to be written, and as John is one of the 12 disciples, again, or the 12 apostles, this makes the credibility as an eyewitness pretty accurate. And so that's the wonderful thing about, as we read these, we're reading, especially John, we're reading from an eyewitness. We're reading from someone who witnessed and was part of Christ's life from the beginning with John. Um, One of the unique things about John that we're going to see as we go through this is John uses I am statements that Jesus used, actually, and it's only one of the few gospels that do that, but he uses it 7 times, and we're going to look at this a little bit more detail of what that means and the importance of I am, because people will say, well, Jesus never said he was God, and technically, if you take it to a technical stance, yes, Jesus never said that he was God, but he did say several times I am, or use the term I am, which was a reference back to God. And we'll study that a little bit more as we get into it. And then lastly, this gospel was written for a specific purpose, and that was so we would believe. And the key verse to that is toward the end in John 20:31. He says, "But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in His name." And so, John is a unique book, and as he read it, you can kind of see that it looks like he used Matthew, Mark, and Luke maybe as a reference, a little bit, the other gospels as a reference, because his is a little bit different. Like, his parallels a little bit, but it is a lot more different than the other three gospels, and it kind of goes off, has some stories in it that's not in there, but so it's an interesting read the way he decided to write versus the three others. So the first thing we start with is John 1:1. Like I said, this is a very famous introduction, and the New Living Translation says, "In the beginning the Word already existed, the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Other translations say, "In the beginning was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word," and so it's a little bit different, but I still like to teach out the New Living Translation here. But the neat thing about this is he just basically starts it out with his intro saying, "Hey, God was with Jesus, who was the Word." When we're talking about the Word, that's Jesus, was with God, and it sets forth this statement through the entire book of John that, hey, this is who Jesus is. He is God. He was with God, and we're going to see in with verse 1, and then we see in other verses that everything was created through him. We're gonna see that here in a little bit, but verse 1 also sets forth a little bit of our basic foundation of our faith, which is the Trinity, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper as we go through. Verse 3 hits and says, "God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him." So that's a kind of an interesting verse as we look at that. When we read Genesis, we don't quite get the idea that Jesus is with him when he created the earth. We don't kind of see that, but John, he expounds on that and kind of parallels Genesis a little bit with this opening of, God created everything through him, and nothing was created through him. And in verse 4, I think it goes on to say that everything, all life was given through him. So all life, everything that we see, everything that's given life was created through Christ to give us our kind of where we're at today and point us to the life that we can have today. So it's an interesting view there. Verse 5 says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish." And this is an important point, that the darkness is never going to overcome light. It's tried. We're going to see that as we read through these, especially the Gospels. We're going to see where the darkness tries to overtake the light. There's a time when the darkness thinks it won, and the light comes back. So we're going to read that, but that's something we need to take comfort in, is the fact that we know that Jesus' light can never be extinguished. There's nothing that's ever going to extinguish it. Not even the darkness of this earth, even though it can seem horrible sometimes. The light's always going to win out, and so I think that's a very important key verse for us to look at there. Verses 7 through 8 talks about John the Baptist coming on the scene, and it's just kind of a brief introduction, and then John goes a little bit deeper into John and who he is. But verse 7 starts, it says, "To tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light, he was simply a witness to tell about the light." And that's an important key factor, because there was a lot of people back then who thought that John himself was the light, that he was the the resurrection of Elijah, or some of the other great prophets. And John is, John the Baptist, who is talking about, is very to the point of the fact that no, he is not the light. He is the witness to the light. He is only bringing notice, giving people a warning or a notification ahead of time of who's coming, and talking about who's coming and what they need to do to be prepared for who is coming. And that was his whole purpose, and he knew it. He never tried to step out of that purpose, and we'll see that as we go through this. And then we see in verse 10, and this is kind of the sad part of this, is he came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize it. The very world that was created by him did not recognize its own creator. And in fact, in verse 11, we see that not only did the creation not see him or recognize him, that his chosen people, God's chosen people, didn't recognize him. They rejected him and ended up putting him on a cross. Well, we'll see that. And so what happens then is, we see this in verse 12. This extends the possibility of becoming God's children to the Gentiles and not just the Jews. So not only does Jesus come to, and he comes to the Jews first, but his message is for everyone. It's not just for his chosen people who, again, didn't recognize him, but it's for everyone. And so we see that. And then we see in verse 14, so the world became human. Again, the Word became human, and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. So John really, from 1 to 14 here is emphasizing who Jesus was, right? Jesus was God. He was with God at the beginning. He came to earth to show the world his grace, and we're going to see verse 16 talks about that a little bit more. But he comes, and his creation rejects him, doesn't recognize who he is, and then his chosen people, his very own people, reject him and put him on a cross. And then the wonderful thing that comes out of all this, even though it seems horrible, the wonderful thing that comes out of all this is that his grace is welcome to everyone now. Not only the Jews, but the Gentiles as well. And so this is John's introduction into who Jesus was, why he came, and why it's important that we understand who he's writing about in this introduction. And then he kind of hits in John 16 and 17 and 18 a little bit more. The 16 is literally, it talks about God's grace coming, and it literally means that we have received his grace upon grace. It's kind of it's not just a little bit of grace, it's his grace upon grace. And John also, and you'll see this with the other writers as we go through, John also contrasts Moses with Jesus, emphasizing the superiority of the gospel of Christ to the law of Moses. And you're going to see this parallel between Moses and Jesus and Israel and Jesus as we go through the New Testament and look at the Gospels, and see that yes, we had the old law, and the old law was important, but now we have something that's even more important, that even greater than the law that came to us by Moses. And in verse 18, he talks about how the world will fully see God only as revealed through Jesus. So this is a good introduction from John into who we're about to study, who we're getting ready to look at, and then we're going to spend the next couple of days looking at the announcement of John the Baptist and the announcement of Jesus to Mary. So I hope you're enjoying these lessons. Again, if you have any feedback, have any questions, please reach out to me. Please subscribe to the videos, or at least to the YouTube channel, so you get these updated as we send them out. There's a link to the form under these things, so please do that. If you're watching this again on New Year's, I hope y'all have a wonderful New Year's Day, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you.